The summer heat in rural Texas was unbearable that afternoon, but 10-year-old Emma Rodriguez didn't mind as she sat on the wooden fence of her grandfather's ranch, watching her 7-year-old brother Miguel play with his toy truck in the dirt. Their grandfather, Abuelo Santos, had warned them countless times to stay away from the far pasture where Thunder, the ranch's prize bull, grazed alone. Thunder wasn't just any bull. He was a massive black Angus with a reputation for aggression that had earned him his name and the respect of every ranch hand in the county. "Emma, look!" Miguel called out, his voice filled with excitement as he pointed towards something shiny in the grass near the fence line. "My airplane! I found it!" The small metal toy plane had been Miguel's favorite possession until he lost it 3 days ago during one of their adventures around the ranch. It must have been thrown over the fence during their game of catch. Emma's heart sank as she followed Miguel's gaze. The toy airplane lay about 20 feet inside Thunder's pasture, glinting in the afternoon sun like a beacon calling to her little brother. She could see the determination building in Miguel's eyes, the same look he got when he decided he absolutely had to climb the tallest tree or jump across the widest creek. "Miguel, no," Emma said firmly, hopping down from the fence. "Remember what Abuelo said about Thunder's pasture. That bull is dangerous. We'll ask Abuelo to get it for you when he comes back from town." But Miguel was already studying the fence, calculating his chances. At 7 years old, he was small enough to slip between the wooden rails, and Thunder was grazing at the far end of the pasture, at least 100 yards away. "He's so far away, Emma. I can run really fast. I'll be in and out before he even sees me." Emma grabbed her brother's arm as he approached the fence. "Miguel, I'm serious. Thunder has hurt people before. Remember what happened to Johnny Martinez last year? He ended up in the hospital." She tried to keep her voice calm, but panic was building in her chest. Miguel had always been impulsive, but this was different. This was genuinely dangerous. "But Emma, it's my airplane," Miguel pleaded, his brown eyes filling with tears. "Mama gave it to me before she went to heaven. It's all I have left of her." The weight of his words hit Emma like a physical blow. Their mother had died in a car accident 2 years ago, and since then, they'd been living with their grandfather while their father worked double shifts to support them. That little airplane had been Maria Rodriguez's last gift to her youngest son. Emma looked toward the house, hoping to see their grandfather's truck returning from his trip to town, but the dusty road remained empty. She pulled out her phone, but there was no signal. A common problem this far out on the ranch. They were completely alone, and Miguel's desperation was growing by the minute. "Please, Emma," Miguel whispered, his small hand gripping the fence rail. "I'll be super fast. Thunder doesn't even know we're here." As if responding to his name, the massive bull lifted his head from grazing and looked in their direction. Even from a distance, Emma could see the animal's imposing size and the way his muscles rippled under his black hide. Thunder weighed nearly 2,000 pounds and had the temperament of a wild beast, despite being born and raised on the ranch. Emma's mind raced through their options. Wait for Abuelo, but he wouldn't be back for hours, and Miguel was getting more agitated by the minute. Call for help, but their phones had no signal. Try to distract Miguel, but she knew her brother well enough to realize he wouldn't give up on retrieving their mother's gift. "Miguel, listen to me," Emma said, kneeling down to meet his eyes. "I know how much that airplane means to you. It means a lot to me too, but Mama would never want you to get hurt trying to get it back. She'd want you to be safe." Miguel's lower lip trembled. "But what if someone else finds it? What if it gets lost forever? It's the only thing I have that she touched." His words broke Emma's heart, but they also strengthened her resolve. There had to be another way. As they stood there debating, a gust of wind picked up the small airplane and moved it even deeper into the pasture, closer to where Thunder was grazing. The bull noticed the movement and took several steps toward the toy, his massive head lowering to investigate the unfamiliar object. "No!" Miguel cried out, and before Emma could stop him, he squeezed through the fence rails and ran into the pasture. "Thunder! No! That's mine!" Emma's world seemed to slow down as she watched her little brother sprint across the open ground toward the airplane, his small legs pumping as fast as they could carry him. Thunder's head snapped up at the sound of Miguel's voice, and the bull's entire demeanor changed instantly. His ears flattened back, his tail began to swish aggressively, and he lowered his massive head in a posture that every rancher recognized as preparation for a charge. "Miguel!" Emma screamed, but her brother was focused entirely on reaching the airplane and hadn't noticed that 2,000 pounds of angry bull was now moving directly toward him. Have you ever had a moment where everything you love is threatened and you realize that being brave isn't a choice? It's the only option you have left? Time seemed to fracture into slow-motion fragments as Emma watched the nightmare unfold. Miguel had reached his airplane and was bending down to pick it up, completely oblivious to the fact that thunder was now charging toward him with the unstoppable force of a freight train. The bull's hooves thundered against the hard-packed earth, sending up clouds of dust that marked his deadly approach. Emma didn't think, she acted. Without hesitation, she squeezed through the fence rails and ran into the pasture, her heart hammering against her ribs as she calculated distances and timing. Thunder was still 40 yards from Miguel, but the bull was covering ground with terrifying speed. Emma had maybe 15 seconds to reach her brother before the animal did. "Miguel, run!" Emma screamed at the top of her lungs as she sprinted across the pasture. Her brother finally looked up from his airplane, saw the charging bull, and froze in terror. It was the worst possible reaction. Instead of running, Miguel stood paralyzed in the middle of the open field, clutching his toy airplane to his chest. Emma had played soccer for 3 years and was the fastest kid in her grade, but she had never run like this before. Every muscle in her body was powered by pure desperation and love for her little brother. The distance between her and Miguel was closing, but so was the distance between Thunder and both of them. 20 yards, 15, 10. Emma reached Miguel just as Thunder was bearing down on them, the bull's massive head lowered and his eyes wild with aggression. Without thinking, Emma grabbed Miguel around the waist and dove sideways, rolling both of them out of the bull's direct path. Thunder's charge carried him past them by mere inches, his hooves pounding the ground where Miguel had been standing just seconds before. But they weren't safe yet. Thunder skidded to a stop and wheeled around, his intelligent eyes fixed on the two children who had invaded his territory. Emma pulled Miguel to his feet and began backing away slowly, keeping herself between her brother and the bull. She remembered something their grandfather had told them about never turning your back on an angry bull and never making sudden movements. "Emma, I'm scared," Miguel whispered, pressing close against her back. "I know, baby. Just stay calm and stay behind me," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. She could see Thunder assessing them, deciding whether they were still a threat or if he should charge again. The bull was magnificent and terrifying. His black coat gleamed in the afternoon sun, and his massive frame radiated power and unpredictability. Emma began moving slowly toward the fence, keeping Miguel behind her and her eyes fixed on Thunder. The bull followed their movement but didn't charge again immediately. Instead, he seemed to be toying with them, demonstrating his dominance over his territory. Every few steps, he would lower his head and paw the ground, sending clods of dirt flying through the air. "It's okay, Thunder," Emma said softly, remembering how their grandfather sometimes talked to agitated animals. "We're leaving. We don't want to bother you." Her voice shook slightly, but she tried to project calm confidence. Some part of her remembered reading that animals could sense fear and that staying calm was crucial. They were halfway to the fence when Thunder made his decision. With a snort that sounded like a steam engine, the bull charged again. This time, Emma was ready. She grabbed Miguel's hand and ran diagonally toward a large oak tree that stood near the fence line. It was their only chance. If they could reach the tree, they could climb high enough to get out of Thunder's reach. Emma's lungs burned as she pulled Miguel behind her, the 7-year-old's shorter legs struggling to keep up with her pace. Behind them, she could hear Thunder's hooves getting closer, the sound like rolling thunder that promised destruction. The oak tree seemed impossibly far away, but Emma refused to give up. Miguel was depending on her, and she would die before she let anything happen to her little brother. "Almost there, Miguel," Emma gasped, even though they still had 20 yards to go. She could feel Thunder's presence behind them like a shadow of death, and she knew they weren't going to make it to the tree in time. Instead, Emma made a split-second decision that would haunt and amaze her for the rest of her life. She stopped running, spun around, and placed herself directly between Thunder and Miguel, spreading her arms wide to make herself appear as large as possible. "No!" she shouted at the charging bull with every ounce of authority her 10-year-old voice could muster. "You cannot have him!" Thunder was so close that Emma could see the individual hairs on his massive head, could smell the earth and grass on his breath, could see her own reflection in his dark eyes. For a moment that lasted an eternity, girl and bull faced each other in the middle of the Texas pasture. 2,000 pounds of raw power versus 65 pounds of pure determination and love. Then something extraordinary happened. Thunder slowed his charge, then stopped completely, just feet away from Emma. The bull stood there, breathing heavily, studying this small human who had dared to stand her ground against him. Emma didn't move, didn't even breathe as she stared back at the animal that held their lives in his decision. Behind her, Miguel whimpered softly, but Emma never took her eyes off Thunder. "Please," she whispered to the bull. "He's just a little boy. He didn't mean any harm. We just want to go home." What do you think was going through Thunder's mind as he stood face to face with a child who refused to abandon her brother, even in the face of certain death? The standoff lasted only seconds, but to Emma, it felt like hours. Thunder's massive chest heaved with each breath. His dark eyes locked onto hers with an intensity that seemed to see straight into her soul. Emma had never been this close to such a powerful animal before, and despite her terror, she found herself oddly mesmerized by the intelligence she saw in Thunder's gaze. The bull took one step closer, then another, until Emma could feel the heat radiating from his enormous body. She wanted to run. Every instinct in her body screamed at her to grab Miguel and flee. But something deeper kept her rooted in place. This was bigger than just fear now. This was a test of wills between two beings who both had something to protect. "Easy, boy," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of her own heartbeat. "We're not here to hurt you. We just want to leave peacefully." Thunder lowered his massive head until it was level with Emma's, and she could see her reflection in his large dark eyes. The bull snorted softly, and Emma felt the warm air from his nostrils brush against her face. For a moment that defied all logic and reason, girl and bull simply looked at each other, two souls recognizing something fundamental in the other. Behind Emma, Miguel had gone completely silent, as if he sensed that his sister was engaged in some kind of primal communication that went beyond words. The entire pasture seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then Thunder did something that no one who knew him would have believed possible. The aggressive, dangerous bull that had terrorized ranch hands and sent grown men running for cover gently touched his nose to Emma's outstretched palm. It was the lightest contact imaginable, but it carried the weight of understanding between two beings who had found themselves in an impossible situation. "Thank you," Emma breathed, tears streaming down her face as she realized that Thunder wasn't going to hurt them. Somehow this fierce animal had recognized her desperate love for her brother and had chosen mercy over aggression. But their moment of connection was shattered by the sound of truck engines and shouting voices from the direction of the ranch house. Emma turned to see her grandfather's pickup truck racing down the dirt road, followed by two other vehicles filled with ranch hands. Someone must have seen them in the pasture and alerted the adults. The sound of the approaching trucks changed everything. Thunder's head snapped up, his ears flattened back, and the aggressive posture returned instantly. The bull's protective instincts were triggered by the perceived invasion of his territory, and Emma realized with growing horror that the arrival of help might actually make their situation more dangerous. "Everyone stay back!" Emma shouted toward the trucks, but her voice was lost in the noise of engines and shouting men. She could see her grandfather Santos jumping out of his truck with a rifle in his hands, his face pale with terror as he took in the scene, his granddaughter standing face to face with the most dangerous animal on the ranch. Thunder began to pace in agitated circles around Emma and Miguel, his attention divided between the children in his pasture and the men approaching with loud voices and threatening gestures. Emma realized that the bull now saw them as trapped between two sources of danger: the humans who had invaded his space and the other humans who might be coming to rescue those humans. "Abuelo, don't shoot!" Emma called out desperately. "He's not trying to hurt us. Just give us space." But the ranch hands were already spreading out around the perimeter of the pasture, and Emma could see the fear in their eyes. To them, this looked like a hostage situation where a killer bull was holding two children captive. They couldn't see what Emma had seen in Thunder's eyes, couldn't understand the moment of connection that had passed between them. Thunder's agitation was growing by the second. The bull began to paw the ground and toss his head, the peaceful moment with Emma forgotten in the face of what he perceived as a coordinated attack on his territory. Emma realized that they had only minutes before the situation escalated into exactly the kind of violence that everyone had been trying to avoid. Miguel, Emma said quietly, never taking her eyes off Thunder, I need you to listen to me very carefully. When I say run, I want you to go straight to that oak tree and climb as high as you can. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just climb. What about you? Miguel whispered. I'm going to make sure Thunder doesn't follow you, Emma replied, her voice steady with the kind of calm that comes from absolute certainty about what needs to be done. Emma had realized something that the adults couldn't see from their position outside the fence. Thunder wasn't aggressive toward her and Miguel. He was protective of them. The bull had somehow decided that these two small humans were under his care, and he was defending them against the perceived threat of the approaching ranch hands. It was a revelation that changed everything about their situation, but it also meant that Emma had to make an impossible choice. She could use Thunder's protective instincts to ensure Miguel's safety, but it would mean putting herself at even greater risk. Remember, Miguel, Emma said, her hand finding her brother's and squeezing it one last time. Mama's watching over us, and she wants us both to be safe. Trust me, okay? Miguel nodded, clutching his airplane tightly to his chest. The toy that had started this entire ordeal now seemed insignificant compared to what Emma was about to attempt. Emma took a deep breath, looked up at the oak tree that represented safety, then back at Thunder, who was becoming more agitated with each passing second. She had one chance to save her brother, and it would require the kind of courage that she didn't even know she possessed. Do you believe that love can give us the strength to face impossible odds, and that sometimes the greatest act of bravery is trusting in the goodness of those who seem most dangerous? What happened next would be talked about in Guadalupe County for generations to come, becoming the stuff of legend that grew more incredible with each telling. Emma looked directly into Thunder's eyes and did something that defied every rule of animal behavior that anyone had ever taught her. She smiled. Thunder, she said in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear, I know you're scared. All these people are making you nervous, aren't they? But Miguel and I, we're your friends. We understand you. The massive bull stopped his agitated pacing and turned his full attention to Emma. Around the perimeter of the pasture, the ranch hands watched in stunned silence as the 10-year-old girl continued talking to the animal that had terrorized grown men for years. You know what? Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. I think you've been misunderstood. I think everyone thinks you're mean, but you're not mean. You're just protecting what's yours, just like I'm protecting my brother. Emma began walking slowly toward Thunder, and every adult watching felt their heart stop. But Thunder didn't charge or show any signs of aggression. Instead, the bull stood perfectly still, as if mesmerized by this fearless child who seemed to see something in him that no one else had ever recognized. Emma, what are you doing? Miguel whispered, but his sister was completely focused on the bull. I'm going to ask Thunder to help us, Emma replied, stopping just arm's length away from the massive animal. Because I think he's been waiting his whole life for someone to ask instead of just being afraid. Emma slowly raised her hand and placed it flat against Thunder's massive forehead. The bull closed his eyes and leaned slightly into her touch, a gesture so gentle and trusting that several of the watching ranch hands later swore they thought they were hallucinating. Thunder, Emma said softly, Miguel and I need to get to that tree, and then we need to get home to our grandfather. Will you help us? What happened next left everyone speechless, just as the title had promised. Thunder, the aggressive bull who had never allowed a human to touch him without violence, gently lowered himself to the ground in front of Emma and Miguel. It was a gesture of submission and trust that no one who knew the animal's history could have imagined possible. Climb on my back, Emma told Miguel, her voice filled with wonder at what was happening. Thunder's going to give us a ride. Miguel looked terrified, but his trust in his sister was absolute. With Emma's help, he climbed onto Thunder's broad back, still clutching his airplane. Then Emma climbed up behind him, wrapping her arms around her brother to keep him secure. "Okay, Thunder," Emma said, patting the bull's neck gently. "Take us to the tree, please." Thunder rose to his feet with the careful grace of an animal who understood the precious cargo he was carrying. He walked slowly and steadily across the pasture toward the oak tree, his massive frame moving with a gentleness that transformed him from a dangerous beast into a noble protector. The ranch hands around the perimeter watched in absolute silence as the bull they had feared for years carried two children to safety. When Thunder reached the oak tree, he lowered himself again so that Emma and Miguel could slide off his back and climb to safety in the branches. But Thunder wasn't finished. As Emma and Miguel settled themselves in the tree, the bull positioned himself at the base of the oak and lay down, creating a living barrier between the children and any perceived threats. It was a gesture of protection that left no doubt about his intentions. Grandfather Santos approached the fence slowly, his rifle forgotten in his truck. "Emma," he called out, his voice thick with emotion. "How did you know?" Emma looked down at her grandfather from her perch in the tree, Miguel safe in her arms, and Thunder resting peacefully below them. "I didn't know, Abuelo," she replied. "I just trusted. Sometimes when you're brave enough to see past what everyone expects, you find out that the scariest things are actually the most beautiful." Dr. Sarah Martinez, the county's large animal veterinarian, arrived an hour later and confirmed what Emma had somehow instinctively understood. Thunder had been exhibiting classic signs of isolation and stress in defensive aggression because he had been kept alone for years. Bulls were social animals, and Thunder's aggression had actually been loneliness and frustration expressing itself in the only way he knew how. This little girl, Dr. Martinez told the gathered crowd, did something that professional animal behaviorists train for years to accomplish. She saw past the surface behavior to the real need underneath. Thunder never showed aggression toward humans again. Word of what had happened spread throughout the ranching community, and Thunder became something of a local celebrity. Children from neighboring ranches would come to visit the gentle giant who had been transformed by the courage of one little girl. Emma and Miguel kept the airplane their mother had given them, but it was no longer Miguel's most treasured possession. That honor now belonged to a photo that Grandfather Santos had taken of them, sitting on Thunder's back. A little girl who had found her courage, a little boy who had learned about trust, and a misunderstood bull who had finally found his purpose as a protector. Years later, when Emma was grown and had children of her own, she would bring them to visit Thunder, who lived to be 18 years old, and tell them the story of how sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose love over fear, understanding over judgment, and trust over suspicion. The ending that left everyone speechless, Emma would tell her children, wasn't that we survived. It was that we all discovered something beautiful about ourselves that we never knew was there. Have you ever had a moment when choosing love over fear revealed something beautiful that you never expected to find?